Now Farrar tries to give him some breathing room, and he's going to take a shot deep downfield, and open is Bernard Berrien, and the former Bear will go 99 yards for a touchdown.
Manning on 3rd and 10. He fires, and the catch is made by Cruz, who breaks free. One man to beat. Victor Cruz down the sideline. 99 yards from Manning to Cruz.
Wes Welker pulling away, and he ties an NFL record with a 99-yard touchdown.
Andre Davis, and Davis will score 99 yards. Wow.
Hello and welcome to 99 Yards. I'm your host Liz Fox, and I am joined by Gareth Duxbury and Jonathan Payton. How are you both?
Very well, yes, can't complain for a Tuesday night.
I'm starving because I'm putting this podcast ahead of my own dinner, so I'm putting the team first. Unlike most wide receivers, I'm all about the team this evening. Did you see Robbie Anderson at the weekend?
Well, yes.
You saw that clip? Oh,
yeah.
Unbelievable. Stereotypical wide receiver.
That was brilliant. It took you 10 seconds to have a go at a skill position player, Johnny.
New record. It's just, wide receivers and their own egos just never underdeliver on that. Yeah, good. I'm good.
Good. So, in this week's podcast, we'll be discussing the Thursday night football matchup between Washington Redskins and Dallas Cowboys, Tom Brady's nomination for the BBC Overseas Sportsman of the Year, the NFL awards and how it needs to be fixed, and finally, as we usually do, the upcoming Sunday games. But first, we need to talk about the Monday Night Football and the fact that Ravens are back in the playoff race after a 23-17 win over the Texans. Now, the Ravens aren't the most exciting team in the NFL, and there's no doubt about it that they certainly had to push through for the win. Their defence, as usual, came through in the end, and they managed to fend off a Texans comeback in the final minutes of the game. Now, the Ravens stand at 6-5 and hold the number 6 spot in the AFC playoff race. Jono, your team is the New York Jets, who too are in the AFC conference. What were your highlights of the game, and do you think that Baltimore are worthy a spot in the playoffs?
I don't know if anyone outside of the Steelers and the Patriots are playoff worthy. It was a weird game. It's the Ravens are a strange team. You've got Flacco, who is a good deep ball thrower, and sort of has all the skills to be a traditional pocket passer, but they just have no deep passing game at all. Even though they've got Mike Wallace and Jeremy Maclin, who are deep threats themselves, but they just don't push the ball down the field at all. They've got a decent running game, and they were able to run a bit on the Texans, and which probably sort of helped them over the line, combined with the turnovers that the Texans, the Savage, provided them, and the fake punt. But I don't know. They're a funny team, and they're probably one of those teams you don't really want to face in the playoffs if you're like the Steelers or the Titans, because you might end up getting upset by them. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. That sort of group beyond the top two. I do like the Jags, but they really laid an egg in Arizona, didn't they? But it's going to be interesting. That's sort of that wild card. That 5th and 6th seed is going to be a real interesting one in the AFC, I think.
Yeah, and you're going to have a couple of bad teams in there because, the Ravens aren't fun to watch. Sorry, Ravens fans. Joe Flacco is not fun to watch. The D is good. There's some spark on the running game, but the wide receiving core, I know, look, they're beat up. They've been beat up all season. They're missing a lot of players. But the Ravens are like a lot of that, like you say, Jono, that pack in the AFC who aren't fun to watch, who are going to be sacrificial lambs as you get closer on. And if you look at the Ravens' wins, yes, beat the Bengals, yes, beat the Browns, beat the Raiders. That's not great shakes based on how they're playing. Beat the Dolphins, no great shakes. Beat an Aaron Rodgers-less Packers and beat the Texans. They've not been that great. They lost to the Titans, lost to the Vikings, lost to the Bears. They're not great, and to see him in the playoff may be a little disenchanting. On the other side of the ball, the Texans, Tom Savage is Tom Savage. DeAndre Hopkins can do as much as he wants, and he's not going to drag them to victory. I suppose the only highlight is that you've obviously got Deshaun Watson to come back, you've got JJ Watt to come back, you've got Whitney Merciless to come back, and Jadeveon Clowney is playing outstanding ball.
Yeah, there probably isn't a better team. There probably isn't a better player to watch than Jadeveon Clowney at the moment. Him and Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald. I'd like, of all the defensive players you could watch, you'd sort of pay to watch. Those
Campbell as well in Jacksonville. He's getting so much penetration, but he's not quite as sort of dynamic as those two. I do get that. He's a bit more a traditional big guy up the middle, but. Yeah, I mean, lost season for the Texans. The Ravens are in the hunt. They've got to go to the Steelers. They're at home to the Lions, but last 3 weeks are at Browns, Colts, at home to the Colts, at home to the Bengals. Could see that Bengals game being a decider for the 6th seed.
Yeah, the Bengals have sneaked up, haven't they, around everyone? Yeah, they sort of like bring a real team you haven't paid much attention to this season at all. I think I've only seen the Bengals Texans. Was it a Monday night game? Might have been on that game.
Yeah,
and the Texans won that, but it's going to be an intriguing race at the end. I think the Ravens are brilliant against the run when they've got Brandon Williams in there. Such a different team to the one that was at Wembley. They just got run all over by the Jaguars. But I think they're still the pass defense of the Ravens is average. They face a Brady, they face the Steelers. I can't see them winning out against them.
No.
And apparently, was it Jason LaCanfora was saying that there's just so much apathy in Baltimore at the moment with this team. Just the lack of excitement or buzz about this team, even though they are in the playoff picture. So
yeah, I think it's because you've got lofty standards. Ever since the franchise moved there. They've had, the 2000 team was one of the all-time Ds. They had that run under Flacco, and now they're wearing the contract as a result of that as a millstone around their neck. I mean, I don't like Joe Flacco as a quarterback. I think he's, like you say, John, he can push the ball down the field, but for some reason they don't do that. And there's not much else. He's quite statuesque. I just don't enjoy watching the Ravens this season, which is a bit of a shame. I think Harbaugh's a good head coach. I like him, but. Should the Ravens be in if they were in the NFC? Is that you're seeing the real dichotomy between the AFC and the NFC in terms of quality this year? Because I don't think the Ravens are as good as, say, a Cowboys or a Washington or a Falcons, a Panther. These teams that are sort of at that level and just below in terms of the 4 to 6 seeds.
And look how much trouble the Packers gave the Steelers. I don't think the Steelers could even live with that top 4 or 5 grouping in the NFC. Sorry, do you pin this on Marty Morningwick though? Some of this Raven stuff because I'm a bit more of a. There's part of me that quite likes Flacco because I just like big, immobile, big-armed quarterbacks. It probably goes back to my days supporting the Jets and Ken O'Brien in the mid-'80s. But as commentators were saying last night, there's a thought around Baltimore now that did Joe Flacco just get hot at the end of the season, at the end of the 2012 season? He had passer ratings over 100 in those three playoff games and in the Super Bowl in 2012. Was that actually just a hot vein of form, but the real Joe Flacco is the one you've been seeing for the last 2, 3, 4 years?
Yeah, well, I think that playoff run will go down in the ages. 11-0 TD to interception ratio. He was on fire. Hitting. He was throwing the deep ball. But they have cycled through offensive coordinators. They've had
Cameron
and Tressman, and and it always seems to be it's just not quite working out. And I think that is down to Flacco. I think he's an average quarterback. He's not a terrible quarterback. Just because I don't enjoy his style of play that much doesn't mean that I don't see the value of what he can do. But if he doesn't have the tools around him, he's a bit one-dimensional as a quarterback. And I think pinning that on the OC is a little bit disingenuous. You look at his contract, the figures the other day, and it's basically that until 2020, and when he goes down to about 8 million in dead money, is the first time they can really get rid of him from this contract unless they trade him. So I think it was the Ringer NFL show where they were saying, it's basically Flacco could last the entire Trump presidency, which, if you are a Baltimore fan, I imagine is a little bit depressing because think of Flacco for 3 more years and you're struggling to get to 500 and squeaking as a 6 seed. That's not what they expect. That's not what the franchise expects or the fan base.
I do want to have a slight rant about something. I feel like, Liz, you should play music at this sort of point. But it's about Javorius Allen's touchdown, the rugby-style ball one. And I always come down on the side of the defence with this sort of thing. And I've scrolled through the rule book today as well. And because for some reason I always thought that it was illegal. You weren't allowed to push have this rolling maul, because otherwise, I'm sure Bill Belichick could have come up with some wacky play to take advantage of this. But it seems to be there's a lot of rules sort of against what you can do. You can't pull a player, but then there's a small article there which just gives an example about someone pushing a ball carrier over the line and how that should be allowed. But just in terms of the concept that you can, to me this completely contradicts the forward progress rule.
Yeah.
I should say it an American way. Forward progress rule. But it's So what you're saying is that the offense can push and push in one direction as far as they can, and the defense can't push back half a yard against them because that's forward progress. It's finished. I just find it a bizarre concept. Actually, there's nothing that can be lost from the offense's point of view if you start this rolling maul happening, because the defense can't push back. As soon as the defense gets any sort of leverage, it's like play's over. I just find it bizarre that it's allowed. We sort of see it sort of coming a little bit more into the game, more and more. That you sort of see these plays where the offensive lineman can sort of catch up to the play, and then just as I say, sort of all gather around the ball carrier and sort of create this rolling maul. Anyway, that's my rant and moan.
Yeah, but I think it's exactly right. It's because there's a contradiction. Forward progress stops, so you don't get so you get knocked back 4 yards, you don't lose those yards. But I know, isn't it something about as long as the attacker's legs are still churning, so he's still maintaining personal progress, that then you can get support. They couldn't sort of lift him off the ground and use him as a battering ram to go through.
Yeah, you're not allowed to lift him off the ground. That's right. Yeah,
but yeah,
it's 12.4a or something. If anyone wants to have a look at the rule book,
someone can fact check us.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm sure you all had this email too, but earlier this week I received an email from NFL UK asking me to vote for Tom Brady as Overseas Sportsman of the Year for the BBC Sports Personality of the Year Awards. I mean, how dare they? Don't they know that I'm still hurting from the 2014 Super Bowl?
I didn't get an email.
You didn't?
Maybe it's just special people.
Thanks.
Yeah, I didn't get one. I'm also a bit cynical with this sort of thing. Before the season started, so the BBC have had it for 2 years. After Channel 4 had it, the rights, and they just released some statement, NFL UK and BBC, that there was they'd signed up in quotation marks partnership, whatever that meant. No sort of length of time, no money spent, etc. And if you sort of dig a bit deeper and stuff, and you read around it sort of seems that. In effect, NFL UK use BBC as a commercial platform. Really, I think they essentially pay for those highlight shows on the BBC. They provide OC and Jason. I think the BBC gives them and Eddie Butler doing his voiceovers, but Whisper Films are the production team behind it, and I think they film it at BT Sports. And obviously, as part of this deal, BBC Sport do a lot of BBC Sport Twitter handle and social media does a lot of promotion for the NFL, and the NFL are really really quite aggressive with their marketing channels. They've done stuff with Sport Bible and Joe, Sport Joe.co.uk this year. There's some they're promoting the sport a bit more on the website, and there's the Twitter guy on joe.co.uk is pretending that he's getting into American football, trying this NFL for the first time this season, sort of thing. But actually, it's like an influencer marketing campaign. The NFL paid them some money, and they're sort of trying to, promote Red Zone. And so I sort of wonder if this is also a little bit part of, have they sort of like promoted? Have they sort of gone to the BBC and sort of asked if Tom Brady could like be in this category? Sort of promoted him, sort of argued the case, because why wasn't LeBron James in this category last year? To me, like Brady, brilliant, 5th Super Bowl, good comeback, and you've read the blurb on the website, and he did brilliant in that game. Of course, always overlooked that the Patriots defense held the Falcons to 21 points, the leading offense. But, why wasn't LeBron James up for this last year? Like a historic Cleveland Cavaliers win. Like literally, we talk about quarterbacks as if they're one-man teams, but LeBron James driving that franchise to a historic win. It just smells a little bit, that Tom Brady, that the NFL got this player in, and also they're doing some stuff with Sports Relief, which is great. But I think they're really sort of trying to get the NFL in all these different channels on the BBC, and I don't know. I just the cynic in me, especially with then these marketing emails trying to get people to vote, the same way they did with Jay Ajayi last year in the MVP voting, sort of makes you wonder whether this is sort of another sort of mini marketing campaign getting Tom Brady in this category. But
well, I must say, John, you make a passionate case for the deeply entrenched cynicism and conspiracy theorists among us all. I love
a conspiracy.
But I mean, if you look at it, that field, it's
weak. Well, I don't know. That's harsh.
I mean,
in terms of big personalities, it's weak.
Yeah, I mean, but you look at, Katie Ledecky's had an amazing year. McFadden, one of the greatest Paralympians. I don't know Sally Pearson. I don't watch the athletics as much. Michael Van Gerwen is the best darts player in the world at the moment. I'm a fan of the arrows, I must say. PDC, not BDO. And he's unreal to watch. I mean, fantastic. But really, you've got Federer in the field, and he won his 8th Wimbledon. He is, for me, the greatest to play the game. I love watching Roger Federer.
And the Brits love Federer as well.
Yeah, we do. I mean, he's so suave. But I think Brady's there legitimately. I do agree. I love how you phrase it as a good comeback. I mean, it's the greatest comeback in the history of the Super Bowl era. And he did play a massive part in that. I know Edelman's catch, and you're right about the D and the Atlanta play calling, but that was one of the spectacles of the last few years in the NFL, and statistically, and it going first to overtime. And then you add in his record and all that. I think, legitimate. 172 million people watch the Super Bowl in America alone. But I agree with LeBron. Exactly right. I mean, if you look at what he did last year, also coming towards the end of an amazing career. Yeah. Yes, I can see that. But you can't argue. Federer's going to win it, but I think you can't argue with Brady being on there as much as
it sort of makes sense. I just want to clarify when I meant weak. In terms of like,
I know what you mean.
Sports, there's no like overseas cricketer in it. There's no rugby player.
No, exactly.
There's no overseas football player because there's no big championship, international championship.
I mean, tennis is the only tennis is the biggest sport in there globally, isn't it? And I mean, but it's do they give it Federer's sort of end of career type?
I think if Federer. I think if Federer was in the main category, he'd probably win it.
Yeah, definitely. So, speaking of awards, there was an article by Kevin Clark for The Ringer that was shared with me earlier about the NFL awards and how he feels that the NFL is still giving the MVP to the same kind of player that they have done every season, so basically a good quarterback on a good team. He feels it's time for the season-long prizes to better represent how football actually works. We've retweeted it for anyone who fancies to read of it first. But John and Gareth, what are your thoughts on this?
I really like Kevin Clark's writing. I like him on the podcast, and I like that Slow News Day segment he does for The Ringer. So I think it's a really good article. And there's some good points in it, definitely. The awards don't mean anything. Your MVP is different. If your MVP is an offensive player, but then your offensive player of the year is different, doesn't seem to make sense. It's almost like, well, it's going to be a QB on a good team, and then a consolation prize will be somebody else. Obviously, these individual gongs are very hard to pick out when you are playing in a team sport. So perhaps things like he suggests, the best position unit would be sensible, best playbook rather than just the best assistant coach of the year award. I think all make sense. And change of MVP to most impactful player, where he uses the example of, Peyton Manning for the 2012 Colts, is exactly right. If the Dolphins had Tannehill this year, would they be better? Probably. Without Tyron Smith, are the Cowboys as good? And we'll come on to that in a bit. I like his point that Tyrod Taylor left the Bills for only one half of football, and they disintegrated without him. So, I think it is sensible, because the awards don't tend to make that much sense. It's going to be the most exciting, quote unquote, quarterback that wins the MVP. Not necessarily the best quarterback, not necessarily the one that is the most complete quarterback. It'll be the most exciting, and then your offensive player of the year will probably be the running back that's broken out. So it just feels a bit futile and represents those things that Roger Goodell really loves and the fans really love, but rather than representing perhaps what the players themselves, the teams, the coaches all value in players. That's my thought.
Yeah, especially with the main MVP awards. What's the point in having a most valuable player if the only positions that can ever really win it now are quarterbacks, and if they're really having a bad season, or if the running back really does amazingly, like Adrian Peterson, they can just about nab it, But Lawrence Taylor won this award 30 years ago. Like, what? I just can't comprehend what a defensive player would have to do versus the bad years every quarterback would have to have for a defensive player to win it now. Mark Mosley won it in 1982, strike shortened season, who was a kicker for the Washington Redskins. Can you imagine that? The kicker. I mean, as much as
Go Washington.
Justin Tucker, you just can't imagine that in a million years now. Sort of the game's moved on, the rules have changed, the media focus and how they write about the game has changed so much so that the MVP is just most valuable quarterback. And if you and if you just read, every year Peter King's sort of constantly ranks it throughout the week, throughout every week, doesn't he? In his top five. And it's just some years it's like you just drop, it's quarterback who's made least mistakes. Sort of like a ranking up the top. So it definitely needs a new, like a revamp. With a quarterback specific award, and then as they say, a bit more sort of like more nuanced and more, more just probably just different categories, because the game is so complex and everything. There's so many different influences, isn't there? But one thing I did want to pick up on the Kevin Clark thing, another moan, which I think we'll get into in another podcast about statistics, etc. But another one that's winding me up at the moment is this Russell Wilson being responsible for 82% of the Seahawks' offensive production. And it's like, he's not responsible. If he throws a 2-yard screen that goes for 35 yards, that is not being responsible for the entire play. This just constant. Anyway, I won't go any further. It just winds it slightly winds me up, the whole. Wilson really is the offense in Seattle, but just we can't be giving 2-yard passes at screens that then the running back runs 30 or 40 yards. We can't give all that yardage to the quarterback. I'm all for giving any pass that goes behind the line of scrimmage or a 1 yard past line of scrimmage, just noting that down as a run. That's been my change, but that's
I think it's brave of you to take on the boss's team.
I can't even say anything.
I'm not saying the team as such.
Just the star quarterback.
Just this popular stat that's growing and growing.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I just flicked up the MVP winners. So since LT in '86, the only non-quarterbacks are Thurman Thomas 91, obviously.
Did Barry Sanders do a joint one with Brett Favre?
He did. So you had Emmitt Smith 93. 97 was Sanders and Favre. 98 you had Terrell Davis. Obviously, great season. Marshall Faulk 2000.
I mean, look at that. Just look at that though. In that 10-year span.
Yeah.
You know, like suddenly it just changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sorry,
and then it's disappeared. And so you had Sean Alexander 2005, LT 2006, and then all QBs until AP's comeback season 2012.
Yeah.
So it's QB or running back for the last 21 years. 31 years.
31,
yeah. God, Jesus. It needs fixing. But these things are popularity. You know, they get like you say, they have the big schmaltzy honours show, and you know everyone makes barely palatable, unfunny jokes, and it's all a big love in, and everyone gets to see highlight reels of QBs slinging the pigskin, which is what everyone wants.
And you know the highlight shows really aren't. They're not for obsessive fans. They're more for your casual fan. Sports personality of the year. I'll often say, that's a sports program for people that don't like sport. It's sort of like your classic sort of like Wimbledon, sort of like your mum that watches Wimbledon. Not to be sexist, your mum that watches Wimbledon, sort of like once a year. Wimbledon's on. Oh, I like tennis. And maybe a bit of Six Nations. That's about it. And Olympics when it comes round. And I love Spotty. It's that's the market it's aimed at, really. So it's probably the same with this, isn't it, in America? Really, it's not. Yeah, it's a sponsor's commercial marketing thing. But it would be good if it had a revamp.
So I'm going to do a Kadeem. I don't know if it's breaking news or not.
Whoa!
Can you believe it?
No, I don't know, but you're putting it up. I'm getting excited.
Apparently, Giants have named Geno Smith their new starting quarterback.
Oh, amazing! My son is going to be so happy. I bought my son. Right, okay. So I bought my son back in. When did the Jets play in London? He was like 3 or 4. He was 3 or 4. So the Jets played in London. Was it 2015? And I bought him a Geno Smith shirt because we were going to go to the rally. Okay, and from there he fell in love with Geno Smith, or the idea of Geno Smith. Like, where's Geno Smith playing? Where's Geno Smith playing? Well, obviously, I bought him that in the off season. Then he got his jaw broken, so he never played that whole season. Yeah. So I was like, oh, he's just injured. He's going to play soon. Never played. So he's always like had this weird 3, 4, now he's 5-year-old obsession with Geno Smith. But he's a Giants fan because he fell in love with the Giants when we went to see them last year against the Rams. So this is like this is Christmas come early.
Oh.
But this also sounds crackers. Look, just reading this. So McAdoo has said that Geno will start on Sunday, but that rookie Davis Webb will also play. If he doesn't play in week 13, then some point before the end of the season. And Manning has come out and said, Coach McAdoo told me I could continue to start while Geno and Davis are given an opportunity to play. My feeling is that if you're going to play the other guys, play them. Starting just to keep the streak going and knowing you won't finish the game and have a chance to win it is pointless to me, and it tarnishes the streak. I mean, McAdoo's got to go. I mean,
he is mental.
Yeah.
He absolutely is mental. Yeah. Who does that? If the Giants weren't such a proud franchise that just, do things properly, so they just fire him.
Yeah.
It's obviously not the dressing room.
But that's Manning done. Manning to Jacksonville in the off season is going to start gaining traction now.
I think you're probably right
because he's not going to stay.
Someone tweeted though that if you charted Drew Brees' first 3 years against Geno Smith's first 3 years, they're exactly the same statistically. So, as a Jets fan that watched his first year, Jets fans really had no patience for him, but he does throw quite a nice ball. I know there's issues there and stuff, but there is quite a good quarterback in there somewhere. I'm not sure playing with like the Giants reserve receivers behind that line, with a no-name backfield is going to particularly help. But wow. I love it. I love the madness. Of it all.
Well, brilliant. They'll be cleaning house this off-season, so McAdoo will be gone, Manning will be gone. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, but it's just, as a Jets fan, it's like typical Giants as well. They're going to get a much better draft choice. They're going to probably end up drafting like the best QB in the draft. On a rookie salary. It's just so typical. It really is. Anyway.
So, of course, Week 13 starts with Thursday Night Football, and it's an NFC East divisional matchup between Washington Redskins and Dallas Cowboys, who both stand at 5-6. Clearly, America's greatest team is struggling at the moment, but Gaz, as a Redskins fan, how do you see this game going?
Redskins are alright, are they?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the Cowboys?
Cowboys, yeah.
It's not America's greatest team, it's just America's team.
Meh.
Yeah.
I don't like them either way, so...
Yeah. So, I mean, this is essentially, the loser goes home. Both standing at 5-6. 10 wins might not be enough to get you to the playoffs in a very strong NFC. The Falcons and the Panthers are probably going to get... Well, the Panthers will get to 10, they're 8-3. The Falcons are at 7-4. The Seahawks could get to 10-11. So you need 10 wins to be in consideration. And, basically both teams stand at 5-6. So one of the teams has got to win and then run the table. If there is a tie or a Washington victory, then we also have our first guaranteed division winner, because Philadelphia will win the NFC East because they hold the series over Washington. So how do I see it going? Well, Washington are beat up. We have been beat up all season. I don't like saying we. They have been beat up all season. There's so many people missing, and particularly looking at the early week injury report, Trent Williams didn't participate today. Roulier, the rookie centre, didn't participate. Terrell McLean on the DL didn't participate. You got limited practice with 13 guys. But on the other side, Dallas have been really disappointing. They've been poor. And I think a lot of, I've listened, Mike Lombardi has been saying, it's Sean Lee. Sean Lee holds it together, and if he's not there, they're not the same team. I tend to agree with that. I love linebacker play.
Doesn't he love Jason Garrett as well?
the clapper. Yeah, I think that's a great name. I think that's fantastic. Because I don't get what Jason Garrett does either. I mean, I just don't understand how he's lasted so long with such a mediocre Cowboys team over the last few years. But when I look at it, I really think it's a coin toss. I know Washington are depleted, but they're at home. Kirk Cousins has been playing out of his mind all year. He's been making stuff happen, but they've been so Jekyll and Hyde of playing really tough up in Seattle and then just disintegrating in the last minute of play against the Saints. It's really hard to know what you're going to get. So with the Cowboys, I think can Dak improve his performance? He's been a bit hit and miss recently, and does Sean Lee play for them? Obviously, I'm going to back Washington to just squeak past. And I actually think Washington have a probably better chance of, having a fun end to the season. It's in Dallas. Sorry, not in Washington. So Washington go at Dallas, at Los Angeles Chargers, home to the Cards, home to the Broncos, at the Giants. So it's not. No teams there are amazing. The Chargers are probably tough, but Dallas also, they go to the Giants, go to the Raiders, at home to the Seahawks, and at the Eagles. So even if they win tonight, I can't see them getting to 10. Probably can't see Washington getting to 10 either. So I think it'll be interesting for fans of the NFC East. I think for everyone else, it'll probably end up not really mattering that much because neither team, unless something remarkable happens, is going to make the playoffs. But it's a good Thursday night game, and it's good rivalry, two big franchises. So hopefully a good match to watch, and hopefully for me, Washington come out on top.
Yeah, it's amazing how the Cowboys have fallen apart. Think of all the other teams that have had injury problems, not to say quarterback, but other, even the Texans, injuries all across the board. But how the Cowboys have just fallen apart from being contenders until Ezekiel Elliott's suspension, which then obviously coincided with some other injuries.
Yeah, particularly Tyron Smith at left tackle.
But then they came back. It's amazing that just having that extra quality in the backfield that Elliott brings, just changes your third down game plan.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're looking at 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 11, and that puts pressure on quarterbacks more than anything, doesn't it? And suddenly it's a different season that Prescott's playing. It's a different team. It's a different game. It's just so interesting. It's just so interesting to watch someone like Prescott, who had everything in place around him last year, and then executed brilliantly within it.
Yeah.
But you know, to be drafted as a quarterback, to be drafted by it, you don't actually want to be drafted in the top 5.
No.
You actually want to be drafted by one of the teams, who's missed out on the playoffs or is in the playoffs, really, because going to a team that's more stacked and knows what it's doing and has other pieces in place really benefits you.
Yeah.
Maybe this is what Prescott would look like if he'd gone to a Browns or a Bills or a Jets.
And I know when we talked about the young quarterbacks the other week, I sort of forgot to mention Dak in full, and I put it on record. I think he's a really good quarterback, but he came out of a system at Mississippi State that everyone's like, it's not a pro offense. Obviously, it's spread. He doesn't have to do too much. He was picked 135th overall. And he had a really, really good, as you say, John. He was on the team with all the pieces, and particularly the best O-line in the league, which really helps.
We've probably seen the last 5 or 6 years.
Exactly,
wasn't it? It was standout.
And QBs regress. They have blips. He's in his second year. He's a young man. He's still learning the game. Now, what you want is a coach that can really add value to him. And is that happening with the coaching staff at Dallas, or is it a vanilla offense that was carried by his better than expected play, Zeke Elliott being an absolute monster, and that O-line just absolutely tearing up? What you're seeing this year is Dez isn't having a great season. Jason Witten's been in and out. Cole Beasley was never that good. I mean, Dak made him look great last year. Terrence Williams isn't doing much. There aren't as many options, and I think it's a bit hard to say, oh well, Dak was amazing last year, but Dak was amazing because he was able to do what he needed to do. And when you increase the plate, and the options and the responsibility, it's going to take time. And I think he's going to be the starter there for a decade. I think he's got all the tools. So as much as I don't like to, because it's Dallas and one of my least favourite franchises, you've got to stick up for him a bit, because I think he's a really good quarterback. But you're going to have blips. He's a young man learning the game.
Yeah, as we've seen this year more than anything, it's coaching, as you say. Obviously with McVay and what he's doing with Goff and all that thing that's come out this week about how McVay gets once the offense lined up with 22 seconds to go, so he's got 7 seconds to look at what the defense is doing and then change it up and be able to speak to Goff before 15 seconds and the helmet communications switched off.
That's amazing.
What a help that is to a young quarterback. That's unbelievable. Someone said that he's not seen a quarterback do that much at the line since Payton Manning. And that's all McVay helping Goff out to do that, to change the play. Although what will be interesting about that, now that's come out, surely road game is going to get harder because the fans are going to be going, Seattle. Imagine that game in Seattle, them knowing that McVay's going to try and talk to Goff through the headset, and he's then got to communicate that to the offense. Yeah. And just on the 25 seconds to go, they're going to be all on the play clock. They're going to be shouting as loud as possible to try and drown it out.
Yeah, and the D are going to make last-second adjustments. They're going to line up vanilla and then go into scheme. After a few seconds, but.
Maybe that's what the Vikings did a bit of as well, because that's the loud stadium. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see if you saw Belichick go up against that as well, what he'd come up with.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's all about who is there for the Cowboys to really help Prescott through this time. Yeah.
And as we usually do on our podcast, let's talk about the Sunday games. So in the 6 p.m. kickoffs, we've got Falcons Vikings, Ravens Lions, Bills Pats, Bears. Too much wine.
Is that northern speak for Bears?
Totally northern for Bears. Bears 49ers, Packers Bucks, Jaguars Colts, Dolphins Broncos, Saints Panthers, Titans Texans. In the 9 p.m. games, we've got Chargers Browns, Cardinals Rams, Raiders and Giants. And the late Sunday game is Seahawks at Eagles or Eagles at Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks-Eagle game is probably the one I'm most excited for. I'm sure my Seahawks will lose. Philadelphia are on one at the moment, and to be honest, I think they look pretty unstoppable. I just think of all the games, that's probably the one I'm most excited by. What game would you say you're most looking forward to, and why?
Both mine are in the early slot. It's 3 of the 4 NFC South team. So Falcons Vikings is a really important test of if the Falcons are legit. If Dallas win on Thursday, I'll want the Falcons to win because I think Minnesota are pretty, sewn up the North anyway, and Falcons to edge ahead. But I think it's important for their D particularly and that offense to see how they go up against one of the real contenders.
That's a big test.
Yeah, huge test. So I'm excited for that. And then the Saints Panthers. Panthers have been winning but not looking convincing at all season.
Horrible.
Yeah, you saw them. I'm sure you watched them in depth against the Jets, and again. But it's a test for the Saints. Are the Saints legit? They've coming off a loss to the Rams. You've got to make sure of that. You've got to make sure of your own division. Get your home field game, even if you're the third seed. So I think those two are the really, really intriguing ones. Obviously, Seahawks, Eagles is interesting. I think it's a must-win for Seahawks. We're just at that stage of the season where it really is, especially knowing what you will know at that time. So say if the Falcons win and the Panthers win, it becomes must-win for Seattle. So I think if you're up that late, it's going to be crucial, depending on how results go.
I think the Saints-Panthers games, the whole NFC South, this countdown, the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season is really going to heat up in the NFC South because the Saints and the Falcons have got to play each other twice. So, I think that's really... the Saints could end up missing out altogether. Depending on how these results go. I'm really intrigued by the Falcons-Vikings one. It feels like we're getting playoff games.
Yeah.
Future playoff games almost every week now in the NFC, isn't it? So it's fascinating to watch. How do the Vikings, with their stacked defense at all three levels, but how do they deal with the Falcons coming in and their the weapons, even if Freeman doesn't make it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It looks so good. It's the Buccaneers. It was only the Buccaneers, but still. Can Case Keenum keep going? It would just be such a great story. We've not had a backup quarterback story like Case Keenum for years. It would just be brilliant to see him go all the way. Yeah. And they're just a fun team to watch. The Vikings. Adam Thielen's story of being a Vikings fan as a boy and then being undrafted from high school or university's not interested in him. Then he got to a college and then being undrafted and ending up landing with Minnesota is just
Well, he played local as well.
Good stuff.
Didn't he play local?
He did. Minneapolis. Yeah, he did. Yeah, just
Minnesota State.
Yeah, there's just a hard team not to sort of fall for a bit, Minnesota, aren't they?
Oh man, yeah. I've been on the Minnesota train for a couple of years. I really like Teddy Bridgewater. I love Zimmer. Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr, two linebackers.
Yeah.
They're just two of my favourite footballers to watch. They work so well together. We're at college together. I do, for my sins, love Sam Bradford. But I love what Case Keenum's doing. But say if something does happen and they're in the Super Bowl and Teddy Bridgewater comes back, home stadium, from this gruesome knee injury. I mean, it's got fairy tale written all over it. So I just hope, evil Pete Carroll or Darth Belichick don't sweep in and ruin our dreams.
yeah. Even Xavier Rhodes under.
Oh yeah,
isn't it? Two great safeties.
Yeah, Harrison Smith is great. And then you're not even talking about Griffin and the guys up front, Linval Joseph. Just fun.
Great to watch and just great. Great scheme with Zimmer. Bringing what he did with the Bengals to the Vikings, and as a late 30s man myself, just loving what Terrence Newman still provides.
Indeed.
Against the Rams, he was all over the field. Yeah. Just amazing. So that's the pick by far, isn't it? The Falcons, Vikings. I think for some reason you've missed off, and I don't know how you've done it. Chiefs at the Jets, Liz.
Did I miss that off? What a shame.
I don't know where that's gone. Where's that gone? It's like the game of the week, surely. What's happened to the Chiefs? What has happened to the Chiefs? It's just unbelievable. Falling off a cliff.
Oh dear.
But I think you're being a bit sceptical about the Seahawks because is Griffin going to play? Is Shard going to play as well? Are they going to be fit? I think the Seahawks hang with anyone. If they can get some of their secondary back. They just, however bad and awful they look at times, especially in offense, they have just no rhythm or you just don't know what they're really doing. Can't get any running game going. They've got no rhythm in the passing game beyond Russell Wilson making random plays and sometimes random brilliant plays. But they hang, and they still hang about with people, and there's still enough about them. They'll have a loud home field advantage on Sunday. It's at night time. I don't know. I think that defense will quite enjoy going after the Eagles if they're sort of given a sniff. And it'd be amazing if they did manage to pull it off. It would really shake the NFC up, I think.
It would.
But yeah, I think Even though I'm not a massive fan of games in domes, but Falcons-Vikings I think is the pick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Earlier today, we tweeted out for listeners to ask any questions they'd like us to discuss on the show. Dolphins fan Graham writes, I've read there will be a 2-game suspension for Crabtree and Talib for their fight on Sunday. Are the league right in handing out this punishment? I mean, that was pretty insane to watch. I think it's disappointing that it became such a violent brawl. What are your thoughts? Do you think the punishment fits?
I mean, it is disappointing and it's not all right to see, but on the other hand, it's also brilliant, isn't it, when that sort of thing happens? And you're just like, it's just unbelievable to watch. Like, why are you fighting with someone with a helmet on? Where's this going to go? It's just so weird. The whole Talib ripping the chain off Crabtree.
For the second time.
You can't get your head around it, for the second time. Like Crabtree had actually stuck it down, taped it down, so he couldn't do it, and he still got to it. It's just, what's going on? Kids, they're not even first-year players, second-year players. They're like hardened veterans.
Yeah.
I know Talib had some issues in his early careers. I think they had firearms problems and stuff. Something earlier in his career, and then he went to the Patriots for 3 years, and then he's been pretty decent for the Broncos, but. And Crabtree's been up and down, although he stepped up this year when all the other receivers have fallen away for the Raiders. But I think it does fit the grind just because you can't be seen to be having such an obvious one-on-one battle.
Yeah.
Didn't Crabtree punch Chris Harris in the stomach?
He did, yeah. I mean, they just kept going at it and going at it. I mean, I'm with you, Jono. Like the crime fits. Crabtree should definitely get 2 games for throwing a punch for a guy with a helmet on, because don't do that. The guy's wearing a helmet, it's ridiculous. Yeah. That's probably my biggest takeaway. Don't throw a punch at a guy in a helmet. You're not going to come out on top.
Yeah, I slightly love it though as well. It's just a bit rich.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's sort of like it's just like the Raiders and Broncos. They hate each other. Great. It's the Raiders. They're involved. Yeah. Part of me loves it as well. It's probably the right decision. It's probably the right decision. Yeah. but it's sort of great as well.
Cowboys fan Andrew asks, with us approaching a 3/4 mark of the season, which teams are the biggest surprise based on your thoughts at the start? Which are better and which are worse than you guys expected?
Well, I think it's hard to say. I mean, I was down on the Eagles, so that's a personal thing. I thought they were going to struggle, so that surprised me. I think the overall surprise in the league is obviously the Rams and the turnaround there. I mean, that's unreal. Yeah. Biggest disappointment? I mean, I did think that it's hard to say it's a big disappointment because I thought the Titans would be slightly better. I think the Raiders actually are a big disappointment. Thinking of Super Bowl contenders going in, making that step from a 12-win season. I mean, they're probably the biggest disappointment. I'm a bit disappointed in the Cards because I love Bruce Arians. I thought they were going to have one last final push. And you've got your perennial disappointment if you're a Browns fan.
Yeah.
I think I'm surprised. The Bucs and the Titans were everyone's off-season darlings. The Titans are leading their division now, but they're just getting no love because they're just not much fun to watch at all.
No, they're not
pretty
great.
Miserable.
Yeah.
And the Bucs, it's just it goes back to the quarterback thing, and it was a hard knocks thing with the Bucs as well. But everyone's just like, right, it's their 3rd season, ready to step up now, Mariota and Winston. And people just sort of overlook maybe a lot of the Bucs. Probably, another thing people fall into is wide receivers. So people fell in love with the idea of Deshaun Jackson and Vincent Jackson, for the Bucs. In the same way that people were like, Brandon Marshall with Odell Beckham and Sterling Shepard. It's going to be lights out. It's like absolutely, obviously injuries as well, but still, there were problems beyond that for the Giants. So the Giants probably been let down, and Dolphins fans always fancy themselves a bit in the off season, so they can't be happy either. But I called out the Raiders on our pre-season preview thing on the site. I said the Ravens are being overrated.
Yeah.
So I'm quite pleased with that one.
Called it.
Called it. Absolutely. Yeah. But I think, but you know, as always, the Jags are probably a slight surprise, just because even though everyone goes, of course, they're so loaded with talent, especially on defense, they should be doing what they're doing. You know, they should have 7 wins by this point. The fact they actually have managed to do that is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
But the AFC is still sort of quite predictable, isn't it? It's like, Steelers and Pats on top, are they? No, okay. Whereas the NFC is the league of parity. So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You just couldn't predict that. No one's predicting the Eagles and the Vikings and the Saints
and the Rams.
As
your 4 division winners. No.
Yeah, exactly. Although here come the Falcons, maybe. But, yeah. Just the NFC is always fun. It's always fun every year because it just changes every year. Whereas the AFC, for whatever reason, is just entrenched. Where it's the quarterbacks, I don't know, but it's just entrenched.
Yeah,
the Patriots and the Steelers are always going to, lead the way.
Yeah, and that's when it gets a bit boring, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, anytime the Patriots leading the way, of course.
Well, that's all from us on 99 Yards this week. Thank you to each and every one of our listeners. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Please share your thoughts with us on Twitter, and of course, if you have anything you'd like us to discuss on a future podcast, let us know. Thanks for listening.